Welcome back. This is Steven with Down the River Forge, and today I'm in Shell Beach, Louisiana. I just launched from Campos Marina, and I'm headed out to Fort Proctor, an old abandoned fort out there. I'm gonna scope out some little bayous, see if I can catch some fish. So here we go. All right, guys, there it is, Fort Proctor. So you can see that it's just completely surrounded by water. Behind me is Lake Borgne. This was about a 30-minute paddle from Campos Marina. I don't know if you can see that, but I mean, it is completely surrounded by water. So this fort was built in the 1850s, and it was supervised by P.T. Beauregard. And due to hurricanes and the breakout of the Civil War, this fort was actually never garrisoned. And it's a cool little paddle out here, but I don't think I'm gonna be able to get to it because there's all these rocks right here, and I'm not gonna get out, try and pull my kayak over there, but pretty cool. All right, you can see Fort Proctor in the distance there. I'm kayaking back towards Campos Marina to Shell Beach, but there's another cool little piece of history out here on Lake Borgne, and that is the Filipino Fishing Village called St. Malo, and I'll tell you more about it, but it's not far from Fort Proctor. If you're looking back there in the distance, probably somewhere back there, St. Malo, and I'll tell you more about that here shortly. All right, I'm out of the water, and right where I was kayaking at, where Fort Proctor was, right across Lake Borgne, was an old Filipino settlement. And these Filipinos settled that area in the late 1700s, and that area was known as St. Malo. And a lot of these Filipinos were escaped enslaved persons known as Maroons, and to avoid capture, they settled out in the swamps and the bayous on the shores of Lake Borgne. And in 2019, St. Bernard Parish erected this historical marker here. And it says, St. Malo was the first permanent Filipino settlement in the United States. In the first half of the 19th century, Filipino sailors established a village on the southern shore of Lake Borgne on a site previously settled by Native Americans and Maroons. By the mid-19th century, St. Malo is the largest fishing village on the lake and a symbol of the growing Filipino presence in Louisiana. So this is not far from Lake Borgne, where I was kayaking at, and it's just a cool little piece of history here in Louisiana. Arguably one of the first settlements by Asian Americans in the United States, if not the first. So a look around, it's an old house there. And another historical marker here. It says, here in Land of Oxen in 1788, Governor Bernardo de Galvez appointed Commandant Pierre Felipe de Marigny to parcel land on the bayou for Canary Islanders. Later, Creole planters bought large estates on the bayou. Let's go check out this building here, this little house. Louis Alfred Ducros Museum and Research Library. Built around 1800. So a nice man just walked up and he actually opened the museum for me. So I'm gonna go in there and check it out. There's all kind of cool artifacts and paddles and shells from a long time ago. So let's go check it out. So this is a copy of the Harper's Weekly article about St. Malo. And that's a look at the old village. Looks like some sort of sword. Old paddle. Another old paddle. Looks like pieces of old pottery. Old dugout pirogue from 1870, made by Alejandro Meneses. It says, made this dugout pirogue about 1870 according to oral tradition in the Meneses family. Native Americans taught the Islenos to make these pirogues by burning and chiseling long cypress logs. Meneses used this pirogue throughout his life. He was a professional hunter, trapper, and moss gatherer. Oh, look at that. Gift of Dale Bordelon. All right, so I'm with Mr. William Highland, and he's standing next to the dugout pirogue of Alejandro Meneses?
Meneses. The Meneses family came from La Gomera in the Canary Islands. They actually arrived here in 1783. And the first one was Antonio Meneses. This was his great-grandson, Alejandro. Alejandro grew up in the community that was called Bencheque, which today we call Reggio. Bencheque was actually an indigenous place name from the island of all places, Tenerife. But in any event, he was throughout his life a subsistence liver. So he gathered moss, he hunted professionally, he also became a trapper and ultimately a commercial fisherman. So when he was very young, according to family tradition, he made this pirogue when he was 10 years old. We know that he was born in 1860, so that would mean that the pirogue was made around 1870. And he used it throughout his life. He married Maria de Gracias, and he was quite prolific. He had many children, and his descendants are all over St. Bernard and in the region.
All right, so Mr. Highland and I are over at the first little glass case that we came upon, and Mr. Highland, you were telling me about this ore in there.
Yeah. It's definitely a Native American piece. It was found in an oyster reef near Lake Borgne. It's in an area called the Segundas, and we had it carbon dated. It was given to us by an oyster fisherman, and according to the date, it's about 1,400 years old. And then in both of these cases, you'll see collections of arrowheads, stone tools. For instance, here's a hatchet point. That was a hammer. And you'll see bone tools, also remnants of game that had been consumed by the Native Americans. The first Native Americans, it appears, started coming here about 2,500 years ago. And periodically they would trade with Indians from Native Americans, indigenous people from the Ohio Valley. So the people from the Ohio Valley would come for our pottery, and you see the shards of pottery in these cases, and then they would trade the pottery for their projectile points. And there are some pieces of, some shards of pottery there that are about 2,000 years old.
Wow, that's incredible. And this has all just been collected or donated over the years?
This was actually donated to us, other than the paddle, by Benny Treadaway, who was an avid amateur archaeologist. He was a Canary Island descendant, and he was the first and only curator of Ducros Museum.
Very nice. Do we know anything about this other old paddle over here? This one right when I walked in?
That actually was for testing syrup.
Oh, okay.
And that came from the Solis plantation, where sugar was granulated.
Wow.
In the 1790s, here in St. Bernard Parish.
Another cool old paddle.
But that was actually for testing the density and the quality of the syrup. You know, you would go through several different stages in the granulation of sugar. You would first crush the cane to extract the juice, and then they would continue boiling it until it became a syrup, and then ultimately it granulated. And I'm oversimplifying the process considerably.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Very cool.